Only the kind ones. The reporter walked in from the waiting room. He smelled of aftershave and sweat. His hands jittered as he sat down and pulled out a small notepad from his jeans. It was obvious that this man was nervous and scared. He tried to avoid eye contact, possibly in the hopes that he wouldn't see how focused and calm I was in comparison. I stared him down like a wolf stares at its next meal. He scratched his scraggly beard and straightened his cheap jacket. His opening query cowered in the back of his throat, afraid of the horrors it may find. His lips quivered as he finally spoke.
"You're the Wayward Inn killer, correct?"
I never did like that title. It seemed too forward. No finesse. No style. Yes, that is correct. But my name is Brian Ruiz, I stated, as a wild grin stretched itself across my face. It was my first time being interviewed, and I have to admit, I was a little giddy about how this would show up on paper.
"You've killed 13 people altogether, yes?"
he asked, getting straight to the point. No, I've killed 17, but there's no evidence that could find directly linking me personally to the other 4, aside from my confessions. Altogether, it was 10 women, 5 men, all ranging from 22 to 37 years of age, and 2 small children aged 7 and 5. After this answer, I was barraged with insults varying from disgusting monster to unsympathetic beast or something in between. I've heard many of these before I became what I am now. Once upon a time, I defended myself. But now I don't see any justification for my actions. I know what I did was wrong, that taking another's life is the single most horrible thing to do, and I definitely didn't need to do it. Yes, my driving force was simply that I thought I could.
Who was your first victim?
The ceasing of insults caught me by surprise. Nathan Carter. A nostalgic feeling shot up my spine as I spoke his name once again. My grim tale began right after I had graduated from my high school. I was a grade A student with a promising future ahead of me. I was weighing my options up on what would be the most profitable path. I always had an obsession with death. Once in school, a girl had brought in her pet mouse to play with the school's mouse. Of course, this led to her mouse becoming pregnant, and when the girl didn't want to keep them, I volunteered to. So I went home this big day when they had finally grown to a sizable amount, with a small cage full of these mice. That night, I put a small piece of food inside with a mousetrap to see what might happen. As expected, one of the mice tried to get the food, and promptly its neck was broken by the trap. But I observed something amazing. The other mice ignored the body of their brother and took the food. I wondered if it was like this with humans, if we would ignore the death of others if it meant we could gain. That image of death stayed with me for the rest of my life. After graduation, while I was still choosing my path, my parents thought it would be a good idea for me to go on a kind of adventure. A road trip. They thought I should explore and see the world with my own 2 eyes. I agreed, for the most part, but as I was exploring the deeper, less populated parts, I found myself in a small inn far from any nearby town. The windows were broken in many of the rooms, and the wallpaper was peeling off the walls in masses. But a bed is a bed. It was here that I met Nathan Carter. He was 24, with short brown hair and an old cap that had seen better days. His arms were lanky and thin, and he spoke with a strange kind of charm. He was like me. Roaming on the road trip, I mean. He was quite nice and didn't mind at all when I asked to stay in his room because of the rats. in mine. A very trusting boy. Handsome as well. I thought he was especially beautiful when I held him down in his bathtub as he squirmed and writhed, when I forced my hunting knife through his mouth and into his throat to watch him.
That's quite enough, Mr. Ruiz. I don't need to know all these grisly details.
The reporter looked pale and was shivering as he interrupted me. It seemed I was lost in my description. My apologies. The reporter looked decidedly displeased with my apology. I wondered why that was. After I had killed Nathan, I took apart his body piece by piece and packed him neatly inside of the overgrown travel pack, blood seeping out the bottom. I didn't think he needed his possessions, so I decided to take his driver's license as a little souvenir. I took the rope he had packed into the side zips and hung the pack still dripping from the tree out back in the night, his head sticking out the top. The Hangman. Now that would have been a classy name, don't you think so? I asked the reporter. He didn't seem amused by my flash of inspiration. I dug out a hole a few meters from the tree and burned my blood-soaked clothes in it, destroying any direct evidence they could find. By the time I had finished the deed, it was nearly dawn, so I packed up my things and I left for the next town. There were many other times throughout my life where I decided to go on a road trip. My wife would tell you how much I loved being on the open road. She never knew about what I did while we were stopped at all of those places. But in the end, it was her that got me caught. The last time I committed these vile acts was when I was with her. We had stopped at a rather nice inn compared to the others I insisted upon. A woman was abusing her children in the room next to ours. We could hear it all through paper-thin walls. My wife told me to do something, to stop her. I did what I knew how to. I went to her room, I knocked. She was quite short, with stiff, matted hair, and a cigarette hanging from her lip. She was rude and irritating, completely out of my strike zone. But, out of malice and hatred, and kindness for my wife, I killed her. The children, seeing their mother die, even as she had abused them, were just crying there. I knew that children would only lie to get their way. They offered anything, promising to never tell what I had done. But they'll lie whenever it suits them. I couldn't let my secret be revealed. I couldn't let my wife and child be abandoned and scorned. So I took the knife dripping with their mother's blood, and I slashed and hacked, closing my eyes so as not to remember the deed I committed out of necessity. But in this lost moment, I'd forgotten my passenger. My wife had seen it all, and was already clutching at her phone with the police on the other end. I'd always been using the kindness of my victims to take advantage of them, but when I killed to please another with my own kindness, she looked upon it as if it were a festering corpse of the vilest demon in hell. I said to the reporter.
So you regret your actions as the wayward inn killer, Mr. Ruiz?
He asked me. Yes, I regret my actions, I told the reporter. I should have only killed the kind ones.